completely blows my mind whenever you go into any detail about it. But if we go to an icebreaker, what would you say had been your biggest achievement in the transport industry so far?
I think in my previous work, before I was in automotive and now I'm in aerospace, so during my automotive background, I designed an electric machine totally myself, which is on the road right now in a car, which is amazing. Another one, which is another electric machine that takes around in a bus. I have a couple of patents based on my research work, and I think I'm proud because while you're doing all this work, you don't realize it. And then, when you love your work, these things come as an extra, like without you actually trying to achieve it. Like, when we were doing the projects and suddenly someone said, oh, why don't we apply for a patent? Like, which is not really your goal, but doing what you enjoy is taking you to places that makes you proud in the end, I guess.
No, that's fantastic to have a few patents under your name at this point of your career is incredibly impressive. Okay, so second icebreaker then, a little bit more focused back to the wider transport sector. So Amy, what currently is getting you really excited about working in the transport sector?
For me, it's the level of change that the industry is going through. So I'm a person who really likes change, and particularly electromobility. I find really interesting. I love all the moving parts, all the dependencies, and all of the complexity. And it's a very established industry, established on a diesel technology. And or at least road transport, well, all transport really, and helping the industry and being in such a pivotal position to move that industry forward is really exciting for me. And there is a lot of opportunity there for new people to come into the industry with different backgrounds and experience to help drive that change. And that's what the industry needs.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. We see, I come from a completely different sector, but it's exactly the same in terms of the level of change required to sort of meet net zero and the transition.
Yep.
And getting new skills into the sector is just it's paramount right now.
Yep.
Ozge, how about you? What's getting you really excited to be working in the industry at the moment?
I think it's because it's quite dynamic. I could say something similar, although automotive is like way more fast and way more open to the changes in the sector and industry. Aerospace is not really open to innovation or way more slower. But you go deeper into the details of the same project. So I think the variety and details are really attractive for me to work in the transportation industry.
Oh, no, fascinating. I'd be really interested to sort of talk more about kind of the barriers to innovation that you see in aerospace, because I didn't realize that it wasn't as open to innovation as other sectors in the transport industry.
Because things fly and it has to be safe, so it has to go through a lot of procedures and it has to be safe. Lots of safety of flights certifications are necessary. So unless they're 100% sure everything is okay, they don't introduce any technology.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want my flights to be safe. So I can definitely see that being a win for the sector. But I mean, I also want my cars and everyone on the road to be safe as well. So I wonder if there's some lessons to be learned across sort of different transport sectors, but I'm not in it, so I cannot comment further. How about yourself, Maylise? What's getting you really excited at the moment?
I think similar to what Amy and Ozge said, the scale of the change is just astronomical and absolutely brilliant, and we really need it to meet any sort of net zero objective, to be honest. But to avoid repeating what they've just said, I think probably what excites me the most is the impact that we can have on people's life, like the impact of just adding a pedestrian crossing in front of a school, that's going to change the lives of so many people on their journeys to work, and then it's going to influence how they feel about the rest of the day. And I find that just absolutely brilliant. And building on that, how, as transport professionals, we are increasingly trying to pay and listen to communities and integrating their views into the design process, not just as a tick box exercise, but more as a way of co-designing spaces, especially transport networks. I think is a bit of a change that we are seeing, and is a welcome one, because that way we can make sure that we design for people and not just for roundabouts, essentially.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I see human factors coming into sort of engineering spaces, design spaces so much more now, and you can just think of things that have been poorly designed. I remember, I saw a recent post about paths or something that people
The
essentially
design lines,
design on their own, which was fascinating.
You see it in the snow in winter when people just walk where they want to walk, essentially.
Yeah, so it's becoming more and more important as time goes on, and people, I think, I definitely, as a member of the public, I appreciate it.
Yeah, and if I can add one more thing on top of that, I think also it means that by doing this listening and incorporating it into the design, we build for a greater number of people, and we make our spaces more accessible, which is very close to my heart. And particularly with women in transport, we know that the default space tends to be male. The way things are planned and designed, it tends to be by guys for guys, really. And so by listening to more people, then we have a chance to make our streets more open and more inclusive. And I think that's a major achievement when we get to that.
And I'm sure everyone on this call today will really appreciate that work. Right, over to you, Ellie.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Millie's just said about, more diversity, more inclusive. And speaking on diversity, I might just actually sort of stay with you, Millie's, for this. So we'll start with you. So what has been your perception of diversity in sort of your relevant sectors, and how it's changed over your career?
Oh, okay. So I've been working for over 10 years now. I've seen that we talk more about diversity. There is some progress in some areas, but not really everywhere, really.
Yeah.
With Women in Transport, we did a research paper in 2021, which is about gender perception in the transport industry, which I'll pop into the chat if that's all right for people that would like more information. And we still talk about an industry that the survey we had showed that 70% of respondents had experienced discrimination based on their gender, which still shows that there's a prevalent macho culture that we need to do something about. And we do know that there's no simple answer to this, really. So I don't know. I don't know if I want to say on the negative or move on to the positive. Equally, there are quite a few new organizations like yourselves, actually, that are doing a fantastic job at bringing new programs and perhaps just complementing what organizations are not providing for their employees. So I think that those are great initiatives.
Yeah, because that's always the thing, isn't it? So, going from a small organization to a larger one, it's not always feasible for some organizations to offer like the full set. So yeah, I think it's good that some organizations are utilizing other organizations. Amy, did you want to add on to that?
Yeah, so I guess no surprises in the truck and industry. It's heavily male dominated, and I spend a lot of my time working in our head office. When you're in head office, that's not really apparent. There's lots of women that work in the head office. It feels relatively balanced, but the proportion of women as you get into more senior leadership positions reduces. And then also when you look out across our sales and servicing network, and also with our customers that are buying trucks, it is heavily male dominated. So I've been involved over 3 years, and over that time we've got over 100 salespeople. We've had 2 women within that sales network. One of them's left and one of them is about to take retirement. So now we will have no female salespeople in our network. It's a similar story, although I don't have the numbers across our technicians that service our trucks. We are seeing more women coming into those roles, but it's still definitely a minority. And this is really widely recognised within Volvo, and there is a strong focus on increasing diversity. But one of the challenges we see is that we don't get the female applications when we advertise roles. So that tells me that actually we're not getting the attention of women about roles in this industry. And I think it's probably perceived as a male-dominated industry, and maybe not an attractive industry, but it's a fantastic industry to work in. There's so much going on, and it's about getting that awareness out there among women to actually look at heavy transport as a possible career. For all the reasons we've talked about, the level of change, the impact on people's lives, the impact on our economy, all of those things that you get to influence by working in this sector. But getting that message to the right place is definitely a challenge.
It's interesting because I did a talk in it was a girls' secondary school last year, and the talk I did was aimed at 15-year-olds, so they were year 10. And already at that stage, they were saying that they were wary about working in certain fields because of it being too male dominated at 15. So yeah, it's quite interesting at where we actually have to kind of start influencing. So I think a lot of people think it's when people are already in work. Actually, I think we need to sort of pull further back and even talk to kids and to girls in schools. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Oscar, have you got anything you'd like to add?
I think I agree with Amy and Melis. It is a male-dominated area, but actually it also depends on the company you are working in. Like, for example, in Safran, they extremely care about like gender equality, and they really try to get attention from people. So this is actually the most female colleagues that I've ever had in my life, in my last company, which is very surprising for me, which I'm not used to as well, you know. Like, I mean, I also find it like strange, like even as an engineer, as a female engineer, because we also are like, we're used to working with males, you know what I mean? Like, and it's really great to have more females, definitely, but I'm not sure where it's coming from, to be honest. As Amy said, like, is it because it's not attractive for women, or is it because people are not really feeling comfortable working with males? So it's, but it is there, it is possible, and we made it work, and I feel comfortable, I feel successful. So I think, and it is, as long as it's interesting for people, I think we should have more females in this sector.
Yeah, I definitely agree with it being interesting. You know, it's that thing that you can't sort of force people into industries, and there are some industries that are more appealing to women than others, but it's about why those industries are appealing that I think is quite an important, you know, why some more than others. Yeah, okay. Julia, I'll hand back over to you.
Yeah, so we've actually had a question come in from the chat, which is like a really good add-on to this discussion, and I think pretty much you guys have covered it generally, but if you had to do/change one thing in your company/sector, this is the way the question's been phrased, that would help increase or to improve diversity, what would it be? And let's go, we'll go in reverse. We'll go Osge first.
Oh, okay. I think if it was more addressing female needs, like, you know, obviously we are two different genders and we have different needs. I mean, we are equal, but we are not the same. So if we can address female needs, like, I don't know, having a birth, or like, you know, anything female specific, and make it easy for women to work in the industry, I think it will receive more, you know, applications, in my opinion. I mean, yeah, I don't want to go into detail, but yeah, many people try to do that, like, you know, having an extra stand in the toilets for females, for example, you know, I mean, anything that can be like, you know, that's only female specific, that can be more attractive.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. There's lots of research around essentially if you build an inclusive environment, people will come. So it's not so we've got there is a barrier there that's stopping people either knowing that it is inclusive if it is already, or that it's just not inclusive to start with. So yeah, I completely agree with that. Amy?
I think along similar lines, kind of as Oscar mentioned around family and that sort of thing. So that's one of the biggest challenges that I find is balancing my family and my job. Not necessarily because of the demands of my job, but just because of the demands of both. And more flexibility around that. And I guess more awareness, so it's easier to speak about the challenges and the balancing that's going on. You know, I try to do that to make sure people are aware of, you know, why I might come into the office half an hour later than I might be expected, and that sort of thing is because, oh, I've dropped my kids off at school, or I need to leave because one of them's ill. But people feeling more free to talk about that across the industry and not be judged around that, I think would really, really help.
No, I agree. I've spoken to a couple of people, not from the HGV industry, but from the bus industry, and their kind of perception of that industry was that it was dirty, that it wasn't flexible, that it didn't have the ability to kind of support women and the families, maybe because of the shift length or the whatever. But I think there is now a lot more understanding and flexibility coming into the sector. So again, it's that question of, do people know that, and is it being communicated in the right way? Maylise, what about you?
So if there was one thing we could do, I think we would have done it by now, to be honest. I think if we just step back a little bit and look at what is happening and where the problems are, we have fewer female studying STEM. Not that you need to do STEM to be in transport, but it's one of the routes. Then we have fewer female applying for graduate jobs. Then we have fewer of them moving into middle management. Then we have everything that's related to the motherhood penalty, which Amy and Oscar described very well. Then we have company processes and policies and cultures which are not always appropriate, and then there is the glass ceiling. So it's like there's a whole range of things and sort of touch point on the career journey they can be improved on. So probably thinking about what we can do as organizations, what we can do as individuals, whether it's supporting others by mentoring, for instance. There's always something that can be done at different levels, or advocating. You know, internally in my former company, I helped creating the maternity policy, for instance, which didn't exist. So there are things that can be done, joining networks. So it really it needs to be a range of things, I think. But if there was really one thing I had to choose, it would probably be around allyship. Because the reality of the sectors, as we've all experienced it, is that it's just the guys at the top, and we need their support in order to implement those new policies, those cultures, to target recruitment, to change the job descriptions, to change the interview processes, all of that. So we do need to have stronger allies at all levels to help us get to a more diverse sector.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. There is no silver bullet, unfortunately. And it's really difficult, as I'm sure you have the same feeling in women in transport as we do in FLIS. We want to do it all. We want to help out in all those touch points that you recommended. But you're right, you know, if we can just help in specific areas, then it's going to be hopefully do something along the way. So if everyone can sort of do a little bit here and there, then it should be helpful. Oscar. Sorry, ladies.
I'm afraid I will need to leave. If there's anything else that I can answer within 2 minutes, that I would like to help.
Oh. No, thank you. I think you've already gave some brilliant insights. So if anyone's got any questions for Oscar about the aerospace sector generally, we'll get those over to her. So please just drop them in the chat.
Thank you very much. Thanks for
inviting
me.
Okay. Can I just add something quickly, Julie, on that what you were saying? It just made me think about one of our work streams at Women in Transport is around intersectionality, which is about understanding and showcasing and exploring the sort of different layers of privilege and disadvantage that individuals experience. So obviously we're talking about women in transport, but there might be a number of others, for instance, being a mother, for instance, being from a I don't know, a disadvantaged background, being from an ethnic minority. I'm English is not my first language, for instance. There are a number of these things as well, and I think recognizing how those different layers intersect as well, and not just taking it through one angle, I think is probably where the the diversity, equality, and inclusion discussion needs to go as well, and to reflect and to add on the idea of there is no one-size-fits-all solution, basically.
Yeah, I completely agree. I am signing up to that, so I'm very excited to go and see that. And then
I think, if I could add to that as well.
Yeah, of course.
One of the things that I kind of live by as well is that there's kind of women within senior roles within the industry have the responsibility to make that change as well. And I think, you know, there's a lot that can be done around company policies and enabling a more diverse culture. But I think that as a woman in a senior role within the industry, we have to model and live the culture that we want it to be. And that sometimes means you have to be brave and kind of go against the way things are done and just stick it out. And that's one of the things that, you know, that I would pass on, like model the culture that you want, because that's how you get change.
Yeah, be the change that you want to see.
Yeah,
it is really important in our sector. It's really difficult sometimes, but I think what we all need to do is try and take that step to be brave, and then support each other when we see that happening in the workplace or across the sector. And little plug, mentoring can definitely help with that. Just FYI.
And sort of what Melly's just mentioned earlier about allyship as well is that I think that idea that, you know, everyone can be an ally, and that includes other women. So when you sort of see that, you know, and that whole idea of by kind of exhibiting that behavior that you want to see when you see it, you know, it's as much for us to sort of champion that and push that forward. And that's something that, you know, I think will be really kind of key and important. And it's interesting as well that we were sort of talking about perceptions. When I worked in a PR team, you know, we put out lots of you know, there's a lot of sensational news, especially in transport and the HGV side of unclean roadways and kind of long hours. And, you know, I think that's another thing. I don't want to sit here and go, oh, we need more good news stories, but actually sometimes, you know, it is about talking about those positive stories and that to try and encourage more women through. And I think sometimes actually the media has got a bit of a hand in that.
Yeah, I would totally agree. Do either Maylise or Amy, do you have anything else to add before we move on to the next question?
No.
I think we've answered the question of one thing / do with a multiple array of things that we could do, but definitely all important and definitely required. And so Ellie, I'll hand it back to you for the next question.
Yeah, well, I was just I was actually going to move on because I feel like we may have hit a couple of those. Actually, I wanted to sort of move on to leading innovation. So what ways are women leading innovation in the transport sector, and how can fostering an inclusive environment further enhance creativity and technical advancement? I know this is something we've sort of touched on sort of throughout on how having that more diverse room is making those changes, but it'd be really great to sort of hear some sort of first-hand accounts of it. So Maylise, should we start with you?
Yeah. So we could spend the entire webinar discussing what innovation is. But for me, innovation is trying to understand problems in a new way and trying to find solutions to these problems. And and sometimes those are technology solutions, and sometimes they're simple fix, you know, and some of the simple fix still need quite a lot of energy, you know, campaigning to lower speed limits or removing, you know, one car parking space so that you can put some bicycle racks, that sort of thing. So where women leading that innovation on that front, I think it really draws from our ability, not I don't want to make generalities, but empathy is a great skill that I think a lot of women display in the workplace, certainly in my workplace at Project Centre, and I think that shows that really shows through the interventions that are being proposed and what gets put on the ground on our transport systems.
Yeah. Amy, anything else to add on to that?
So I mean, if I talk about the women that are around me in my role, within the exec within Volvo Trucks in the UK and Ireland, we have 3 women on the exec. So one of them is my boss. So she's the new vehicle sales director. I would say traditionally it's a male job. So she would be the first woman that's done that job. So it's amazing to see kind of her in that role, working across what is a completely male-dominated sales network. Our marketing director is also a woman, and our CFO is also a woman. So it's brilliant to see that we're starting to get that diversity in really senior roles and women leading and making decisions and the changes in the industry, because they're the ones that are kind of visible across everybody. So it's brilliant for me working in what is a male-dominated industry, would definitely be seen as a male-dominated industry from the outside, but actually what I'm seeing is that there's a lot of women around me that are kind of key decision makers.
Yeah, I always say it's quite interesting that marketing as an industry is actually female dominated.
Yeah.
Until, again, with many areas, until you start going higher up, and then you get a lot of senior people positions being taken by men. But what I find it really interesting is actually when you find male-dominated fields like transport, like engineering, and that you have those women that are in those positions, how much it actually does kind of bring in, and having that different perspective in that different industry can make such a difference, and kind of what kind of gets added into that. So yeah, Maylise?
Yeah, I just wanted to come in on that and sort of senior leadership as well. So in the second link that I've put in the chat, which is our equity index, so we've looked at senior position and what they actually are, and it's fantastic to have senior women at the table, but they tend to be in the support functions, in the corporate functions like marketing, HR, communications, etc., and sales is obviously an exception to that, as you're saying, Amy. But where we need to go is all of these companies to also have women in the technical roles, you know, leading the actual change that goes on the ground. And you know, everybody contributes, obviously, but it's yes. about that senior leadership to be represented across areas and not just, you know, specific spots that are traditionally female.
Agree, because when at the end of it, when you get into that room, you're still the only woman in that engineering room, and yeah, it does make such a difference to have those women in those positions. Yeah, so anything else to add on to that? That's interesting about the index, actually. I will have a look at that. That sounds really interesting.
I guess I'm kind of curious. I mean, I'm someone who's trying to break into senior exec positions at the moment. I'm not in your industry, but I'm assuming it's probably a familiar theme across the different worlds. What do we need to do essentially to be considered for those roles more frequently and more commonly? I've got thoughts on this as well, but I was just wondering about Maylise and Amy, whether you had anything you'd like to add.
I think speak up, make your intentions known, talk to what may be a male dominant, what may be a a man in a role that would be the kind of deciding of whether you were considered for that role or not, or also maybe in the role that you're interested in. But we're all just people, and speak up and make your intentions known about what you want to achieve, and ask that question: what do I need to do to get into your role?
Yeah, that's a good question. Know that you're chasing it, essentially.
Yeah, and that helps with the allyship as well. That's where you get, that's how you get your allies.
I read a book. Yeah, I read a book when actually it was the first event I went to with women in transport. So that's how my journey with women in transport started. But it's called Beyond the Boys Club, and it was a coach that was relating the journeys and the sort of lived experiences of a number of her clients breaking through the glass ceilings, and their sort of tips. And you don't take everything from the book, but it might be an interesting read. The other thing I wanted to add is, well, Women in Transport does have a leadership program, so I'll give the sales pitch a little bit, but it's a paid-for program, and it's designed to support women to break that glass ceiling. So we launched it in April 22, and we've had six rounds of the program. I think it's 53% of women on the program have been promoted since they've been on it into senior roles. So it shows the effectiveness, and yeah, I'd invite you all to have a look at the website. I'll put the link into the chat if you want to, but I think it's also okay to recognize that additional help. I'm not always promoting, we need to do more in order to be recognized, but sometimes it does help as well in building that confidence, in opening your horizons, and perhaps in equipping people with a different set of tools that they require to get to that senior level, which I'm not at, so I can't really comment on what you exactly need to do.
No, I think that's really invaluable advice. I think some people sometimes get scared to ask for help and things like in those situations. I'm like, give it to me. I need all the help I can get, and apply for everything. So yeah, it's also, some people don't know what's out there, so it's about sort of advertising it and getting that across to everyone at the correct point, so that they can really utilize those tools and apply for those programs. Because I think, yeah, they're the same in my industry, but I had to search quite hard for them, and I only essentially found them through word of mouth. Normally, it's really sometimes really hard to Google and know that you're going to get value out of whatever you find. So yeah, it's good to sort of pass on the information where you can, and I will shout about that leadership program to everyone I meet in the transport sector. Okay, so going from senior leadership now right to the start of someone who's just entering into the transport industry, either from career start, graduation, or potentially maybe complete career change. Say that you're mentoring someone who wants to come into the industry. What skills would you recommend that they develop, and how is the industry supporting this skill development? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first if you want to.
Yeah, got it.
So I think the key thing really, and there's probably no surprises here, the key skills are communication, and I don't mean kind of written communication, verbal communication. I mean being able to get your point to the right person and land it in the right way, and the ability to influence people and drive some change off the back of that influence. I think that's where there is the opportunity in the industry. It's where diversity really, really adds value through that diversity of thought. And that is what will drive the change that we need. But to me, it can't happen unless you can land your point really, really well with the right person and then influence their behaviour off the back of it.
How would you develop those skills then? How could you practice them in essence?
So I think the best way is to use the people around you, to be open with your kind of nearest colleagues about the things that you are trying to achieve, and ask for their advice and support on how to get the right message to the right person, how to deliver it, how to achieve what you want to achieve, and then measure to see whether you're having that impact. But continually develop your approach, and I find flex it depending on who that person is. So that flexibility is really important. It's not about your individual style and how you do things. Well, it is your individual style, but it's not about a single approach. It's about being able to flex so that it works across a broad range of people with different experiences, different ideas, different job roles.
Yeah, I totally agree. Communication is always my one skill that I just tell everyone they need to nail. And a good starting point that I find is understanding how you understand things. So I'm a visual learner. I'm known as the whiteboard girl in my company. So if I've ever got a problem that I'm trying to explain, I jump up and do it on the whiteboard, for example. But I do then look back across the room, and if there are still blank faces about what I'm trying to communicate outwards, then I need to reassess, as you say, flex. I like that phrase. So knowing how you understand and how you are going to therefore best explain the ideas that you're coming up with, I think it is a really important one as well. Maëlys, how about you?
Yeah, I call that people skills, which is it is related to the influencing and the communication, but it's also related to the empathy, because transport is very, very emotive topic. Every time I say, oh, I work in the transport industry, the number of times I've been asked to fix a traffic light, which I cannot do. If anyone's wondering, I cannot help you. Sorry.
What about potholes?
I was about to say potholes.
Oh, don't get me started on potholes. Don't get me started on potholes. Yeah. So yes, but realizing how much it affects people's lives and being willing to sometimes, depart as well from, I have very strong views about how the world should be, but that's not just me living in the world, and it's just understanding that we need to find consensus in the way that we plan and design our transport systems, because otherwise it's just not going to go anywhere, and we end up with systems that are designed to cater for a certain type of journeys, which don't reflect the entire population, basically.
Yeah. And I'm going to sort of ask the same question I asked Amy about that. So if it's people skills and it's empathy, how would you go about sort of honing those skills as an individual?
A lot of it comes down to introspection, and sometimes you hit a few walls as well, and people question you, and you're like, actually, that's true. Having the humility of recognizing that sometimes you think you have the right answer because you've got a degree in the topic, but actually you don't have the lived experience, and you might have some of the tools, but you don't have all of the in-depth knowledge of how people move around a certain area, for instance, and recognizing that, I think that level of awareness is half of the journey, to be honest.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I remember going onto site for the first time as a young graduate, and I was quite confident in my skills and abilities, but very quickly it was a very humbling experience when you meet people who have 40 years of experience and all of the sort of backup lived, as you say, lived experience.
But actually there is a balance, because obviously
Yeah.
as a woman, as a young woman in a new job, you want to show some confidence, so it's about finding that balance, and like Amy was saying, it's about flexing it at the right times as well. And it's not something that anyone's born with, to be honest. Some people will have a natural flair for it, but for most of the rest of us, we just own it from practicing, and sometimes we just don't get it right, and we get it right the following time.
Yeah,
I find that lots of times you see people who will who clearly know an awful lot about their topic, who will deliver the content. They will tell you what they know and what they want, and they will ask for what they want to happen. But that's more just an outward message. And I think the key to kind of both what I've been saying and what you've been saying, Maëlys, is about like thinking deeply about the person that you are talking to, thinking about their agenda, and thinking about what you need to do to bring about the change in them that you want to happen. And that is less about your message and how much you know and what you've got to say. It's all about how you deliver the change that you need because of what you know.
Yeah, spot on.
on.
Yeah. So I think in summary, what have we got here? We've got communication, people skills, and then impact as those kind of like three, or delivering impact from both of those as your key skills that you'll take forward. Okay, so that is all of the questions that we have at the moment. Unless anyone has a question from the audience, you just pop it in the Q&A or on the chat. And then in the meantime, Amy or Melis, did you have anything you wanted to end on, or just a quick note that we haven't covered today that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I've got kind of an honest thing that I will share about one of the things that I find challenging in an industry and working in a male-dominated industry. And I've spoken to my boss about this as well, because she always comes across as somebody who doesn't find this a challenge. And it's interesting when I said to her, "You're really good at this. Like, why do I find it hard to hear what she said?" But anyway, so one of the challenges that I find is because definitely women are a true minority in the industry. There are lots of meetings I go to, network meetings, big meetings with lots of people in one place. And there's always that time when you kind of walk into the room that is heavily male dominated. And before I walk in, it kind of fills me a little bit with dread. I feel like, what am I going to say? I don't know what to say. And it feels like it's much easier for the men in the room to make that conversation. And it feels much harder as a woman to break into it because, and this is making real generalizations, but these are real experiences. There's a lot of conversation about sport and football that I don't really watch. And these are the things that they're not directly associated with the work, but they're what helps you build relationships and rapport. So every time I go into those situations, I have to have a deep breath and a bit of an action plan about who I'm going to speak to and what I'm going to speak to them about. And it doesn't come naturally and it doesn't feel natural. But it was interesting, kind of talking about that. Sometimes people who make it look like it comes really natural also don't find it natural either. And it feels uncomfortable.
What did your boss say when you asked her?
I think she was kind of surprised to hear that my reflection on her was that she found it, she looked like she found it so easily. So
yeah,
she also shared that, it doesn't come naturally and it's kind of practiced.
Yeah, I hate football, so I really struggle with that as well. Melis, yourself?
I think it's a very valid point, and I hear this constantly from junior members of my teams across the years. So I started networking with women in transport, which provided me a very safe space to basically just bounce from one woman to another. And I always say it because I organize networking events with women in transport, and I always prepare a little speech at the beginning where I say, if you don't know what to say hello, my name is da da da. That's the best icebreaker you're going to find, and that is the truth, really. You don't need to be an expert in football at all to be having these conversations. And I found that having built my confidence with women in transport through so many different sort of safe spaces, I'm now able to do that more, in a random room with loads of very random people that I don't know, and just woke up and just start a conversation with someone standing next to me. I was just to share that there are ways to do that as well.
Yeah, I think practice does help in these situations as well. It's lame saying that, but the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And I think also there is something there about not quite giving people the chance, but I recently had a networking thing with clients, and I had, weirdly enough, similar thing. Guys were talking about football, and it's sometimes asking them questions can be a good way to generate conversation about something that they're enjoying, and then hopefully you can steer it off to something slightly more interesting. But giving people that opening and getting them to sort of talk about themselves and what they like is a really kind of good way of getting people on side with that. So, just because it's a topic that you're maybe not interested in or know a lot about doesn't mean that you're completely frozen out of the situation. So never, I think I'd probably say that to people, never think that. Just find a way to pop it into something that you prefer to talk about.
So
just one more thing as well. Oh, sorry.
No, sorry. What I'm hearing is that we need to be experts in changing the topic. Got it.
Pretty much.
You did that brilliantly, Julia. I wanted to come in and add one more thing. The one thing was that I've practice when I was younger and less experienced, and I advocate for younger members of my teams, is always around having buddies. So we talked about allies, we talked about mentors, we talked about role models, but we not really talked about buddies, people that are at the same level as you, that you can relate to, and you can have the, oh, did she talk to you about football as well, sort of thing. And this is exactly what we're doing, and we're having a good laugh about it. And then, suddenly something that, weighed a little bit heavily on our shoulders just becomes, that's a laugh, that's done, and we move on to the next thing. And I think there's a lot of value in that as well, especially for people that may be an organization where it's just, it's just there isn't anyone senior that's a female. They might just want to look at their level to see if there is some help that's available there as well.
Yeah, informal culture groups and buddy systems. I loved my graduate scheme when I joined, that we were 40 strong, and we had buddies, and it's just such a good way to learn and just gain confidence in a group, in a very new group of people in a new situation. So I totally agree. We've had one more question, which is a really good one, I think, and it's a good one to end on. So recent published data indicates that current Gen Z believe ED&I, so equality, diversity and inclusion, has gone too far, much more than later generations. What's the panel's view of this? So I have many views, but we'll start with Amy.
I think maybe, I guess my personal view on it is maybe some of the narrative around it may have gone too far, but I don't think the impact is there that it's gone too far. So it is about balancing what we're hearing with what's happening.
I completely agree. Maëlys?
I'm spot on, exactly that. Lots of talk, not enough actions.
Yeah, and I think we're in a world now where, because there hasn't been much action or much sort of impact on what we would like to see as people who are in that kind of minority, it gets frustrating, and then the narrative gets frustrating, and it starts sort of turning. The words that we use have got to be really important to make sure that we're always bringing people along this journey with us. So yeah, I think it's an interesting question, and I'd be interested to know why it's specifically Gen Z that think that, because I would have thought that would have come from older generations. But yeah, I'm curious to see that in data. It's Vince who's asked the question, so I'll ask Vince to send out the information. Maybe.
Yeah, please send it to us. I'm also really interested. The other thing, well, an example of just what you said, Julia, is the gender pay gap reporting, for instance. So every year we make a big fuss about gender pay gap reporting, and what we're seeing every year is no progress. So it's good to measure, but we should be measuring progress, really. So that's an example of something that takes a lot of bandwidth, headspace, media noise, but actually, yeah, not enough. Amy?
Oh, yes, I was waiting for you to finish. One of the other things I would add as well is that I would never be somebody that advocates to have any sort of quota. I think a quota is the wrong way to do things, and I think whilst we are aiming to achieve more diversity, that should account for everybody, and there should never be anything that makes it unfair. And to me, I think a quota means that ultimately there must be some unfairness somewhere if you're trying to hit a number. For me, the thing that we need to do to make sure it's fair and also achieve our objectives around diversity is to address the reasons why we don't have diversity. Like I mentioned with Involvo, we have a big focus on increasing the number of women in the organisation, but we don't get the women applying for the roles. So a quota would say if you have one woman apply for a role, then they should get that job, but it should be the best person for the job, and that's what it is with Involvo. But that to me is a real important point, that it should be about the best person for the job, and it's about addressing the underlying reasons why you don't have diversity, not putting a quota on what you want to get. Yeah, no,
I'm in total agreement with that. Vince has shared the the source in the chat if you are interested. So please do go and read that. I'm going to go have a read after this and potentially send you all an email with my thoughts. And I guess in terms of closing remarks, and we kind of covered that off generally, but do you have anything else you wanted to say, Amy or Maylise?
No, thank you for having me. I don't have anything to add.
Just to reiterate again that everybody can do something. We are the change. We don't need to wait for a new policy to come through. We all are in this room, so we can all take individual actions as well as collective actions, whether it's joining a support network, offering help as a mentor, or being a mentee in a mentoring program like Fleece of Women in Transport. They're all things that we can do. So I'd really encourage everyone to do that. And thank you again for inviting me.
Wow, I will second that argument.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amy, Maddie's, and Oscar, who was brief but had some great insights as well. It's been wonderful having you on this webinar, and thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.